Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Tuesday, November the 25th, 2025. You may be wondering why I have got a picture of Princess Catherine on the thumbnail. And, the reason is it's because she's got a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in her horoscope. And there is a conjunction between these two planets today, or perhaps Monday evening if you're in the Americas. And so the Mercury-Venus conjunction is very much a theme of this video, and I will be looking at this conjunction in some detail at the end of the video. But before I do that, I want to consider the astrology and I Ching for today, which is Tuesday, November the 25th, 2025. So here is the chart for today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if appropriate. So as far as what's happening in this chart, you will see that at noon New York time, the moon is at 3 degrees 28 minutes Aquarius. And from the perspective of the United Kingdom, the moon moves into Aquarius at 10:16 a.m. today. So if you're in the Americas, the moon will be in Aquarius, certainly from the sort of early morning onwards. And, when you've got the moon moving out of Capricorn into Aquarius, it is a change, but it's often not necessarily a dramatic change. I mean, Aquarius is a sign ruled by Saturn. So is Capricorn. And so there is going to be a Saturnine feel to the moon in Aquarius, and also with moon in Capricorn. But the moon in Aquarius, it is a positive sign. It's an air sign, and now with the moon in Aquarius, it is the only traditional planet in an air sign. I mean, until today, there were no traditional planets in air signs, and so with the moon moving into Aquarius, maybe there's more scope for communication and conversation, and perhaps also for originality. I mean, the sign Aquarius is often linked with being original, doing things differently, and perhaps being very persistent about it. And of course, also the moon is not in its detriment in Aquarius. It was in its detriment when it was in Capricorn, and so you could say that the moon's condition has improved. Now, when the moon moves into Aquarius, it straight away makes a conjunction to Pluto. So moon conjunct Pluto. Both these planets are in fixed signs, and some of us may be holding on to things quite tightly. We have our beliefs, and maybe we're not prepared to compromise these beliefs. It really does matter. But it's not just the fact that the moon is making a conjunction to Pluto that we need to think about. It's also the fact that the moon is making a sextile to the sun, and I'm a big fan of moon sextile sun aspects, or rather the moon sextile sun configuration. You've got the two lights in fortunate aspect, and so that facilitates a constructive attitude. People perhaps can work well with each other. And at the same time, we have got Mercury conjunct Venus. So Mercury's still going retrograde, Venus is going direct. They make a conjunction at around 22, 23 Scorpio. And I don't want to say too much about the Mercury-Venus conjunction here, because later in the video I'm going to just be talking about Mercury conjunct Venus and nothing else. But suffice it to say, it tends to be a fortunate aspect. Mercury conjunct Venus, is often very creative. It can make things. It can it can also relate its own creativity to other people. So, Mercury could be about the mind, Venus is about relating, and it's also about art. So, if we've got any abilities, now is the time to, think about bringing him out into the open. Although this Mercury-Venus conjunction is in Scorpio, and that is going to moderate the effect. I think that some of us might feel quite precious about what we can do, and we might be somewhat shy. We might be worried that if we give away too much, we might be compromising ourselves, or maybe we'll be exposing ourselves to ridicule. I mean, don't worry. I'm not saying there is going to be ridicule, but that can be our concern. We don't want to embarrass ourselves. And if we are creative, that always presents a risk of embarrassment, or at least our own perceived risk. But I don't think we need to be concerned about it. And so I do think that this Mercury-Venus conjunction, is something very positive. And if we want to do something, make something, involve other people in our core creativity, then now might be a good chance to do it. So that's the picture in New York. If we set the chart for Sydney, Australia, remember Sydney, Australia is just a representative of Australasia, and it's not that I'm specifically thinking about Sydney, but I've got to set the chart for somewhere if I want to look at Australasia. So here is the chart for noon Sydney time. Moon is in Capricorn. Moon is at 25 Capricorn. So I've talked about Moon in Aquarius and some of the features of Moon in Aquarius, but if you are in Australia or New Zealand, the Moon is not going to go into Aquarius until quite late in the evening. So I don't think you have to worry too much about what it means for the Moon to be in Aquarius. So tomorrow, Wednesday, the Moon will be in Aquarius all day long. So that perhaps is something to look forward to. And now I want to switch to the heliocentric view, putting the Sun at the center of the solar system. So here is the heliocentric chart, and we have Mercury making squares to Saturn and Neptune. So remember that heliocentrically, Saturn and Neptune are moving towards a conjunction. And you don't have retrogrades in a heliocentric chart. So once that conjunction is done, it's done, and it's close. It's within half a degree, and it's brought into focus by Mercury. And so if you've got Mercury square Saturn, Mercury square Neptune, it might be that there are things to worry about, or at least we might think there are things to worry about. And that's kind of quite obvious, isn't it? I mean, Mercury is a planet of communication. It's a planet of thought. When it's square Saturn and when it's square Neptune, there just may be all sorts of concerns. We can worry about just the many things that could go wrong. We might feel at times that there is no point, and that's it's more collective than personal. And it might just be that in the world at large, there is a fundamental pessimism, just a feeling that things aren't really moving, and that's just the way it is. And I think that really is the main feature of today. And I don't think there's really anything more to be said. That Saturn Neptune conjunction, it's relevant, and Mercury makes it relevant. So now I want to move to the 12 signs. So these are my forecasts for the 12 signs for today, which is Tuesday, November the 25th, 2025. Aries, you're now being quite upfront. You're able to operate, quite effectively in a social environment. And, really that doesn't matter whether the moon is in Capricorn or Aquarius. You know that you can project yourself, and if you want to have a high profile, then I really, don't think that's going to be a problem. You'll just, know how to behave. And, in many cases, you're going to be able to, enjoy other people's company. So I don't think there's any great need to be alone. You know that people have things to offer, and your ability to talk is going to be very good. And there's just something about the way you express yourself which is just very natural, and people are just going to be just attracted to you. So in general, Aries, we might say that your popularity ratings are going to be very high. And so do enjoy all of this, although it could be that you're in sort of two places at one time. I mean, you're certainly capable of being sociable, of being out there with other people, presenting your ideas, being able to listen, being able to interact. But the question is, are you 100% present today? And I don't think that you necessarily are. I think that you are holding something back. So you're not being entirely transparent. And it might be that your thoughts are just wandering off. They just can't quite concentrate on one single thing, and you don't want to discuss everything. And so there is a secretive streak to you, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be recognized. So I think that you can be secretive and at the same time come over as just being, open and honest. And today it's important that you listen. There are some people that have something to say. It could even be the case that you hear something which maybe you weren't supposed to hear. And so if you're in the business of finding things out, then I think that a lot of questions can be answered, and certain people are just happy to reveal the truth to you. Even if they're not happy to reveal it, there's just something about the way they behave, their body language, which just makes everything clear. So Aries, I don't think that there is, any need, for a great mystery today. Everything is open, everything is up front, and I don't think that you're going to meet serious resistance. Taurus, you have something to project. You don't want to be ignored. You don't expect to be ignored. And you kind of want to be in the center of things, Taurus. You just know it's the right thing to do. And you had maybe paused over the last couple of days. You weren't quite sure where it was all going to end up, and you might have had different ideas, different concepts, and things weren't always certain. But now, with the moon making a conjunction to Pluto, Taurus, I think that you are getting clarity, and this moon conjunct Pluto allows you to bring to bear and quite enormous reserves of power. And so Taurus, if you feel the need to project yourself, I really think you can, and you will just have this clarity that may be almost irresistible. And at the same time, Mercury is making a conjunction to Venus. And this Mercury conjunct Venus, well, it's in Scorpio, it's in your opposite sign. And it might be that your ability to understand people is good, and your conversation skills are good, and you're going to be good at providing a secure framework within which certain other people can operate. And that's just you. And if you want someone to understand something, then I just think you won't have any problems, getting the words out. It is the words that matter, and those words can be important. And if you say the right words, which I think you will, then I think that you can certainly be listened to, and it's maybe that you've got the opportunity to change hearts and minds. Yeah, someone is being stubborn. As a Taurus, you know all about stubbornness, because you're quite capable of being really stubborn yourself. But if you want to change someone's mind, Taurus, I don't think it will be especially difficult. And you just have to kind of know what other people want to hear. If you know what they want to hear, well, that's half the battle. You give them you give people a feeling of familiarity and comfort as they just listen to your soothing words. And when they're comfortable, you can start moving things on, ever so subtly. It's rather slow, but you have your moment. And so today you just might find a chance to really influence someone. And so if it's been difficult to get your message across recently, then I think that there may be a chance that actually things can really start moving. And also, Taurus, I think that your ability to talk is going to be good. And it's not like that you have to be a complete chatterbox, but you'll just know what to say, when to say it. And I think at the same time, Taurus, you're going to be quite a good observer of other people. You can observe them, you can look at their body language, and you can sort of pick up with your feelings, what this other person is really like. And if you really are able to understand someone, then it's just going to make it much easier. It paves the way for concrete action, and the action you take, if you've thought it through, can in most cases be very successful. Gemini. It's a good idea, Gemini, to think about what might be possible, and not necessarily to restrict yourself. I mean, sometimes you feel that you want to restrict yourself because it seems to be easier. You don't want to take risks. You don't want to go anywhere that you've never been to before. You don't understand the rules, and so that's certainly a possibility, but it doesn't have to be like that. And with the moon moving into Aquarius, you might feel ready for a change, a change of scene, and as you move from one thing to another, you'll just feel increasingly comfortable. Just this knowledge that it's all going to turn out right, and you just need a bit of freedom. Though freedom takes many forms, and it's not necessarily exciting. And we do have a conjunction between Mercury and Venus right now, and this Mercury-Venus conjunction is in Scorpio, so we do have to think about what that means. And I think with the Scorpio conjunction, I think that you might just find that there are just things you have to do. You don't necessarily want to do them. You can think of a million things you'd rather be doing, but there is still a sense of obligation. If you don't do it, who is going to do it? Someone has to do it. And if you just sit on your hands, well, that could not just be a wasted opportunity, but you could argue, be a dereliction of your moral responsibility. I mean, I'm not saying that is the case. I'm just suggesting that might be how you feel. And Also when you look around you, Gemini, you have a good sense of the state of humanity, or at least the state of humanity within your neighborhood. You can see how people are behaving, how they're operating, and you can perhaps make some judgments. But there also could be an emotional reaction, and this means that you might be aware of, for example, suffering taking place in another part of the world, and you're aware of that tragedy. As Eberton, might say. I mean, why is Eberton relevant? Well, Mercury is square the Pluto node midpoint, and so if we're talking about the Pluto, and by the way, here it is. I mean, here's Pluto. Here is the node. So you can see the Pluto node midpoint is like about here, around 22 Aquarius, and so Mercury is square that midpoint, and that is. As Eberton might say, might be an awareness of the tragic destiny of a large group of people. And it's not your tragedy; it's someone else's tragedy, and that tragedy may not be there immediately and might not be in front of you, but you just know it exists. And if you know it exists, Gemini, it's difficult to relax, and it could be that what we're seeing is, Gemini being compassionate. Gemini is a sign, well, that's not really known for being compassionate. I mean, that doesn't mean it needs to be harsh or cruel, but it does hit you, and if, whatever is going on, whatever other people are experiencing, it can't be ignored. And so the question then, Gemini, is, well, what do you exactly do about it? And it just could be with simple steps, taking things slowly, not overcommitting yourself, not giving up too much time, just being there, putting yourself in a position where you can help. Your help might not be required, but does that matter? The point is, you are making an effort, and that, as far as the universe is concerned, that's what counts, I think. Cancer. At the moment, Cancer, you're aware that certain things are not easy. You can't expect everything to be easy. I mean, you might like things to be easy, but almost inevitably complications start to arise. And what are the complications about? Well, it could be about another person's behavior, what someone is doing. Maybe you've got a situation which is quite straightforward, quite simple, but someone else is just behaving outrageously, or is just making an unnecessary complication out of absolutely nothing. So that is certainly a possibility. And so Cancer, maybe you have to be ever so slightly wary of other people, and be aware of their capacity for just creating problems out of nowhere. And it's all really so unnecessary. And as far as you're concerned, having a slightly guarded approach might be a good idea. You don't have to be friends with everyone, you don't have to reveal too much. Just focus on what's important, focus on yourself, and then Cancer, I would think that things should be okay, and you can start to use your abilities in new ways, remembering that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Scorpio, and this conjunction, I think, from your perspective, could actually be pretty creative. You're in a position where you can make things that are of lasting value, and it's something very individual. It may be that you can't just create happiness by buying something, for example. It has to come from the heart, and whatever you're doing, you are really prepared to give it your best shot. And so do think about your own creative needs, and ask yourself what needs to happen for you to be in a position where you are living your potential. And it shouldn't be so difficult. I mean, that is unnecessary. And in your own way, Cancer, I really do think that you can be creative. And with this moon conjunct Pluto, this might be about you having the chance to really understand something like never before. You might deal with something unusual. Your first impulse is to reject it, but you have another look at it and you see something interesting, and you look at it again and again and again, and eventually Cancer, things start to make sense. And as things start to make sense, you yourself find that you're more and more in control. So overall, Cancer, I think that things do look good, but you don't want to make things more heavy than they actually are. Leo, I get the impression, Leo, that things are slowly improving. I mean, you'd like things to be spectacular in some respects, but there's no need to try too hard. It's just enough for things to be happening. They don't have to happen in any particular way. It's enough for you to be noticed. And again, being noticed is not the same as anyone sort of gushing, dumping a load of emotions on you. That's not necessarily what it's about. But you do exist, and you have clear evidence that but you really do matter, and you can be at the center of things. Though there's no need, Leo, to take massive detours. If you feel sort of intelligent and perhaps quite wordy as well, then the world comes to you. The world wants to know what you've got to hear. Sorry, the world wants to know what you've got to say. And Leo, you're able to discuss your ideas with considerable passion, and you can see what's going on in the chart. If you look at the sun, it is on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. So the sun is about 12 degrees short of Mars, and Mercury is about 11 degrees short of the sun. So we can say we've got sun on the Mercury-Mars midpoint. And so with the sun on the Mercury-Mars midpoint, Leo, you're going to be a good advocate. If there's some cause you want to advocate for, you can. If there's a person you want to advocate for, not a problem. And you can advocate, for yourself. And when you are advocating in whatever format, you don't have to be a lawyer to advocate, but whatever you're doing, you can do it with great clarity, and you will find that people do listen to you, and that they do take you seriously. So I think that today can be quite powerful, but there is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto. And this Moon-Pluto conjunction is really asking, where the power is. I mean, I think that the average Leo wants to be in control, enjoys being in control, and for most of the day can be in control. But there just could be moments when someone is having an impact, and someone is trying to make their presence felt in no uncertain terms, and that is obvious to you. You might not regard it as being reasonable, but it just may be a case where someone is trying to be in control. And you have to be as realistic as possible. When you see another person behaving in a way that you don't necessarily approve of, ask yourself, what is it actually about? Is it about something really happening in the real world, something very objective, unfolding? Or perhaps there could be a certain sense of imagining on your part. You see something as being more important than it actually is, and in that way, you could create a few problems for yourselves. So be realistic, and don't project your ideas onto other people, or rather your relationships onto other people. I mean, the Moon-Pluto conjunction might, for example, relate to how you were treated by another, by for example, a parent, or something going on in your childhood, and it's standard psychotherapeutic stuff, projecting, and your capacity for projection at the moment is relatively strong. And so if you find that you really believe something about another person, perhaps you should ask yourself what's going on. And it just could be that first impressions can't always be relied on. Virgo, you're aware that nothing is entirely straightforward, and also that not everyone is happy. I mean, it would be great if everyone was happy, because you could relax, and you wouldn't feel guilty. They really wouldn't be a problem if you just want everyone to be happy. But it does seem that not everyone is happy. Some people might be suffering, and when I say suffering, I'm not talking about people I don't think. I think it's more just people in general. It could be suffering in another part of the world that has or is really affecting you, and you want to do something about it. You want to say something about it, but it's not always easy. But you just might be aware of just some unfolding tragedy that sometimes really gets you. I mean, that is the thing about news stories. You read news stories, and most of them you kind of discard, and we've got so much news. It can take a lot to create a news story that really does grab everyone's attention. But you Virgo, and that there are people out there who are in trouble, and it would be nice if you could help them. I think it may be difficult, but at least, Virgo, you're aware, and you can see how outside events, perhaps taking place thousands of miles or kilometers away, are important. And so, Virgo, this might be about your compassion coming out into the open, and it's all for the best, and it's good that you can really understand what makes another person tick. Okay, understanding is never perfect, but you can go some way towards making sense of another person's actions. Libra, it's nice that we have some planets going into an air sign. We've got the moon moving into Aquarius, and I think with moon moving into Aquarius, things are easier. With Moon in Capricorn, there might have been times where you just weren't fully able to get things together. Perhaps you were almost rooted to one spot, to the spot. You just weren't ready to move. You might have just felt a sort of a growing sense of inertia, just nothing happening, nothing moving, and this may not have been something that you really appreciated, but at the same time, what could you do about it? Inertia is inertia. If that's the way you felt, difficult to move on. But now that the moon is moving into Aquarius, I think you can move on, and you can start to see the possibilities, and those possibilities, could be working on quite a creative level. And so if you've got something that you want to do, then feel free, go ahead. And this is happening at the same time as Mercury makes a conjunction to Venus. So Mercury making a conjunction to Venus, maybe that gives your IQ a boost. I don't know whether IQ can really change from day to day, but I think that your intelligence is really at the top of the range right now, and you can maybe see things that other people miss, and these things can they can cover all sorts of areas, including money. And don't be afraid of money. Don't be afraid of thinking about money. Because when you're thinking about money, you could have some interesting ideas. Thanks to this conjunction between Mercury and Venus, and maybe you've just had been a little too focused on one thing, and you weren't able to make a change. And then Mercury conjunct Venus gives you the ability to communicate and to tell people what's on your mind. Remember, this Mercury Venus conjunction that we have today is making a trine to Venus. It's also making a trine to Jupiter. So there is a grand trine feel to the whole thing. And so if you want to make an impact, if you want to discuss money, or you want someone to do something, maybe they haven't been doing something, and if they were able to get themselves together, everyone would benefit, and certainly you would benefit, and I think that you would in the end benefit financially. So if anyone is holding anything back, then maybe think about what actually does need to be done. And if you so wish, Libra, I really think that you can have a powerful impact. You can force people to listen to you, to sit up and listen and realize that you've got something to offer, you've got a message, and you also want to take your knowledge to create change, because maybe certain things have just run their course. They're not doing anything useful. They maybe even be stagnating, and just now is just a time to really be making things happen, and starting to move things on. And just don't underestimate your fundamental willpower. Through the power of this willpower, you can certainly do some quite amazing things. Scorpio. Conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Scorpio in your sign. So this conjunction between Mercury and Venus, it may say something about how you are able to project yourself, what kind of person you are. And I think that many Scorpios will find that they're able to really tell everyone who they are, and you're going to be able to get appreciation. And part of the reason is that you can project yourself. I think that if you make the effort, Scorpio, you're going to be pretty good at talking, being, open and honest about your ideas, whatever it is that you've been working on. Now, as a Scorpio, you can be very secretive, and maybe there's something you've been trying to build up on your own, and you didn't really want any interference, but maybe things are changing now. Especially, as we do have this conjunction between Mercury and Mercury and Venus. It is just something that you can just project in a really quite easygoing way. And also, Scorpio, you have something about you that people like, and the more you say, the more people do like you. And so there's really no need to be shy, to hold things back. I mean, you might be concerned about what kind of reaction you're going to get, but you do have a way with words, or at least you can have a way with words, and just the things you say probably make a fair amount of sense. And once people respect you and they understand you, then it means that things are going to be pretty easy. So I think, Scorpio, it can be quite a useful day, and it's also a day when you can advocate for yourself and your interests. And when I say interests, I mean what is important to you. And that might relate to your ambitions, or your career, or something you're trying to advance. And if you give yourself a chance, then you can be very clear. And a lot of people need clarity. If you make it clear about what's been done wrong in the past, how things need to be done in the future, then people will respect you. And that means that you can be honest without being authoritarian. It's not a time to be throwing your weight around. I think, not least because it's unnecessary. And I do think that people will quite naturally listen to you, and you don't really have to struggle. Sagittarius, you have a fair amount to present. You know that you can make things happen, and you're also aware of your fundamental fire. And of course, Sagittarius is a fire sign, and being a fire sign, you are in a position where you can make things happen, and you'll have plenty of get up and go. And once you make a decision, then things can happen really very, very quickly. And it kind of links with Jupiter, which is your ruler. I mean, Jupiter is, I know this sounds a bit obscure, but it does seem that Jupiter is sesquiquadrate the Sun-Mars midpoint. So, we've got a Sun-Mars conjunction. Okay, it's a very wide Sun-Mars conjunction. It's 12 degrees apart. But the midpoint between the Sun and Mars at the moment is around 9 Sagittarius. And Jupiter at 24, 25 Cancer is making an 135 degree aspect to the Sun-Mars midpoint. So there are a couple of ways of looking at this. I mean, it could be that you are in a real hurry. You might feel that you're in a hurry. You want things to happen. You want things to break down quickly, so that you're able to really, be heard, and that's good. But there can be a problem. I mean, the Sun and Mars together, with this, being 12 degrees apart. I know that sounds a long a long way from one another, but not when you've got Jupiter aspecting the Sun Mars midpoint. And it just could be Sagittarius that you just might take something too far, and maybe you're just not thinking it through. But you want action, and you get your action, but once the action starts, it may be difficult to stop it. So perhaps you shouldn't try in the first place. Some things are just best left where they are. Let sleeping dogs lie, as they say. I mean, it's so true. Let sleeping dogs lie. I'm not really a dog person. I didn't used to be a dog person, until when did I start getting a dog? That's Tooth Dog, 2009. But once you've got a dog, you do realize it's so true. Once you stir a dog up, that's when the trouble is, and it's really one of those aphorisms or whatever it is that really does work. So that may well say something about today. So Sagittarius, I'm thinking that you are at the moment pretty active, but there is no real need to stir things up. Some things just shouldn't be stirred up, and some people should be left alone. I know that there's a Mercury-Venus conjunction, and this Mercury-Venus conjunction at the moment, which is exact at the moment, could say something about how other people are behaving. And it's true that some people are very clever, and they're showing off their cleverness, but don't necessarily bother them. Perhaps you should just watch what people are doing. And at the moment, some people do appreciate their privacy, even if these people are very close to you. You might be in some kind of relationship with them, but they're still holding back. But just because someone is holding back doesn't mean that nothing is going on. Capricorn. We don't have any traditional planets in Earth signs. I mean, this is because the moon has left Capricorn, or is leaving Capricorn, and is moving into Aquarius. And this will happen every now and then until next month. I mean, next month, December the 15th, we've got Mars moving into Capricorn, and then we've got the Sun and Venus moving into Capricorn, and early next year we've got Mercury moving into Capricorn. So we are on the verge of a lot of stuff going on in your sign. But right now, there isn't anything in Capricorn. Okay, the moon might still be in Capricorn just if you're in Australia or Asia. And yeah, okay, if you're in Australia for most of the day, the moon will be in Capricorn, but not if you're in the Americas. So with the moon leaving Capricorn, you're reminded again there is no Earth. And some people are just not very grounded. They are just sort of running around in circles. They're not quite sure what they're doing. There is this question of why, and where is it all leading? And it may be leading in a direction that you don't fully understand, because people just do seem to be displaying a lack of groundedness, and you would like people to be more grounded. But this is just something that's going on astrologically, and you do have to accept things the way they are. And maybe as a Capricorn, who is perhaps one of the more grounded of the 12 signs, you can sort of gently bring certain things under control, even if they're not directly impacting you. Perhaps you're not involved, perhaps you don't have any responsibility to bring something under control, but you might still feel that you need to make an effort. You see chaos, you see people not knowing what they're doing, and yeah, maybe you can sort of gently intervene and somehow make people's lives better and more straightforward. And then Capricorn, you're able to also see how things could work. Even if things are very confusing and it's not clear what's happening, there's always a way for things to work. And I think that Capricorn, you do understand that. And so you can take a situation that just seems chaotic, that does seem to be going nowhere, and you can just turn it round, very quickly. And how do you turn it round? Well, one way of turning things round is to have the right attitude, to be constructive and positive, and to demonstrate that positivity to other people. As you know, I'm not a big fan of positivity, all things being equal. I tend to focus on the negative, but there is always a place for positivity. And Capricorn, if you can demonstrate that, you can just show people that things are fine, or things could be fine if they just behaved in the right way. And perhaps you can at the same time be something of a role model. If you can do that, then I think you're just making it easier for everyone. And you could perhaps be just carrying out your historic destiny. What do I mean by historic destiny? I mean, destiny changes from day to day, but we have to think about what is your destiny at the moment. And I think Capricorn, part of your destiny is just making things easier for people. And one aspect we have today is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus, and this Mercury-Venus conjunction really does allow you to communicate. I think you can talk with just about anyone. You don't have to have met them before, but it's just easy. The words can flow, and by saying the right things, you can perhaps gain other people's friendship. And from a social perspective, I think that today could certainly be useful. You're able to move things on, and you're able also to just show people what you can do, and you can do it in such a way that it doesn't make people suspicious. They're not sort of asking, well, what do you want? No, you don't want anything. You just want things to be better, and you want to just feel better. And I think that that can certainly happen. Aquarius, I think Aquarius, it can be a pretty good day. It can be a day of opportunity, and also a day when you can have quite a powerful impact. And I think your intelligence is going to be very clear, and people are going to appreciate this intelligence. And so you shouldn't be afraid of being intelligent, and even being intelligent in public. It just could be the case, Aquarius, that your ideas are the best ideas. And if your ideas are the best ideas, why would you want to keep quiet about it? It's not that you're being arrogant. You're not showing off. You're just being practical. I mean, you think about what other people are doing, what other people are producing, what other people are saying, and it's really obvious that you're the one who knows what they're talking about. And so that's fine. And I think that especially in a sort of working environment, if that's relevant to you, I do think that you really do stand out. I think that your wisdom and your intelligence and your perceptiveness, they're all out there, and it's very obvious. And at the same time, Aquarius, there is a conjunction between the Moon and Pluto today. As soon as the Moon moves into Aquarius, okay, maybe if you're in Australasia, you won't feel the Moon moving into Aquarius until right at the end of the day. But for most of us on this planet, there is at some stage going to be this conjunction between the Moon and Pluto as the Moon moves into Aquarius. And so with the moon in Aquarius, moon Uranus, moon Pluto conjunction, that aspect gives you the power. It gives you the ability to transform and change. So if you don't like the way things are going, you can create change, but you can create change in such a way that no one gets offended. It's all great, and perhaps that's the kind of message you want to present, that everything is not just fine, but it's just going wonderfully. And if you're positive and enthusiastic, then you really can have, Aquarius, a powerful influence. And you just may find that other people get carried away with your optimism, and people need optimism right now. And being an Aquarius, it's possible that you have your doubts. Optimism is not necessarily something that you really regard as being essential to you, and perhaps you have to dig deeply to find your fundamental optimism. But I really do think that you can be successful, and it's not just about being optimistic as far as what you can do. It's about being optimistic about what other people can do, and you can really be at the moment, very, very encouraging, and that to my mind, looks really good. And so I think, Aquarius, you are at the moment, a great force for good. Pisces, you're still ploughing on. I think the average Pisces does have things that they just want to do. They want to get them out of the way. And, you, at some level, you do want to get noticed. I don't think you're particularly shy right now. And, if you are noticed, then you might say that, that is a sign of success. It means you're getting through to everyone. People are listening to you. And, after that, it's up to you where you want to take things. And so in that sense, Pisces, you do have a lot of choice, and perhaps you will just suddenly have an inspiration, about, where things are going. And, this inspiration, it could come from nowhere, or appear to come from nowhere. And just something just makes sense. And, once things make sense, well, perhaps there's no stopping you. Though, don't take things too far. The Sun and Mars are, they're 12 degrees apart. So they're starting to form a conjunction. And the Sun and Mars, two dynamic masculine energies coming together. And if you're interested, well, you've got Mars conjunct true black moon Lilith, as well. And so that kind of energetic coming together, can create the potential for mishaps, accidents, perhaps things going wrong, and feeling that not everything is going to work out. And if you're not careful, if you're too hasty, then it's possible that something gets broken. You have a minor accident. You're perhaps in too much of a hurry. All of this is unnecessary. It really is unnecessary. And, in particular, Pisces, although you do feel active, that you want to be doing stuff, you don't necessarily have to involve other people. And, at some level, there are things, Pisces, that you do want to keep to yourself. And you perhaps even feel that you need to hold on to them, very tightly. There is a conjunction between the moon and Pluto. And, this conjunction between moon and Pluto is going to affect different people in different ways. But, as far as you're concerned, it could be that there are things you need to build up on your own. And you can do it in a way that is clever, but you've got to think about time frames. And it may not be possible to build up whatever it is you're trying to build up, overnight. It just may take days. It may take a few weeks, but you'll get there in the end. So Pisces, it looks like being, quite a dynamic day when you're aware of your obligations. You're aware of what you can do, what kind of impact you can have. And it's possible, Pisces, that some people are stuck. They don't have enough to work on. They have ideas from the past, but they haven't moved on. And so at the moment, Pisces, you do have the capacity to shake things up. You can do things which force people to pay attention. And this might mean that you can encourage certain people to think maybe in quite a political way, to think about society. And you just know that things aren't perfect, and some things could just make you angry, and anger just could be a theme. I mean, I still think can be a great day. I think you can really think about what you need, but what can make you angry? Injustice can make you angry. I think that you're quite aware of how people are treating each other, and there's not much that's being hidden. If you're interested in any part of the world, I think that it would just be immediately obvious, what people are doing in that part of the world. And so, Pisces, this may go back to you being compassionate, and being compassionate. Well, that's something one associates with Pisces. I mean, you can really feel other people's pain, and you can feel pain across continents. That's relatively easy for you to do at the moment. But you are a Pisces. You're a water sign. Things can connect, and things can flow into each other, and so nothing surprises you, and you are part of everything, and that is a plus. And those are my forecasts for the 12 signs. And now it is time to look at things from the viewpoint of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Tuesday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram number 13, fellowship with others. So this hexagram is about how we get on with other people. And I think it's relatively unambiguous about that. People do matter. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to meet them face to face, but they are there. Maybe they're online or on social media. It depends how we operate. And the question is, how are we meeting them? What is our preferred method of socialization? And this hexagram talks about meeting people kind of by the door. And what that means is we meet people, but we meet people in a way which is kind of open-ended. Okay, we can't immediately escape from the social contact, but there's still a way, and it's really is at a very, very early stage in things, where we're not going to risk too much. We're not going to make too many compromises, and other people are not going to make too many demands. And that might be because we do have a moving line, and it's the bottom hexagram that's moving. So that's right, like at the very beginning of the movement. And so we're trying to reach out to people, to get on with them, to be able to sort of talk, communicate, perhaps enjoy ourselves. But it is quite experimental. And then we have the bottom line moves. So bottom line moving, that means we move to a second hexagram. And the hexagram we move to is hexagram number 33, which is retreat. And so I think it may be the case that perhaps at the beginning of the day we're making an effort to get on with people, and it's not an effort which is entirely successful, but it makes there's some basic progress, and we don't have to make big commitments, and I think that is an important point. And with other people, there's a certain take it or leave it. So if we are with someone and we're not happy about it, we can just leave. It's fine. And so that's very much to be welcome. So fellowship with others, but it's not, I don't think, compulsory. And if we want to have some distance, well, that's fine. I don't think there's going to be any problem there. But retreat is just suggests that at some moment or at some point we feel enough is enough. Retreat saying, yeah, okay, we've gone as far as we can in this particular relationship with this particular group of people, and now's the time to quit and conserve our energies, and also to look at what makes us special and unique. And that's the advantage of retreating, because retreating, there's no disgrace in retreating. It allows us to get our power back, to build up our reserves, whatever those reserves might be. It might be psychic reserves, sort of emotional reserves, to build up those reserves. And we can't do that if we're in the middle of a conflict, or if we're trying to push forward with our advantage. No, at some stage we do have to back off and just not feel that we always have to be at the center of things. And so I want to finish by looking at the conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And Mercury and Venus is seen generally as being quite a fortunate conjunction. So let's look at the conjunction when it happens. If we set the chart for London, here's the Mercury Venus conjunction set for London, and Reinhold Ebertin, in the combination of stellar influences, he talks about every single planetary pair, and Reinhold Ebertin is pretty positive about Mercury conjunct Venus. I mean, if we look at the combination of stellar influences, this is a book that I really would recommend. It's really a very important astrology book, and it's really worth getting hold of. To my mind, it really is a mainstay of astrological study. Ebertin's combination of stellar influences, sometimes shortened to COSY. A combination of stellar influences, COSY. I mean, I don't know how many people have it, but do get hold of COSY if you can. It's still widely available. And as far as the Mercury-Venus conjunction is concerned, so let's just remind us about what Ebertin says about it. So Ebertin says Mercury-Venus. He has this, when Ebertin in his book on combination of stellar influences, the way he structures the book is that, if you haven't seen this book, you see he has, I don't know, you probably can't see this, but on the right side he goes through all of the midpoints, and then on the left side he just talks about the pair in different ways, and he talks about its principle, its psychological correspondence, its biological correspondence. For example, with Mercury-Venus conjunction, or the Mercury-Venus pair, Ebertin says that the biological correspondence is glandular secretions. I mean, I don't know. Medical astrology isn't really, my thing, but I can imagine that might make sense. And he talks about, positive and negative manifestations. And he says, in terms of a principle of Mercury-Venus conjunction, that it does represent an appreciation of beauty. And that reminds us that there is a very sort of aesthetic dimension to Mercury and Venus. Venus is a planet of beauty, and then Mercury is the cognition, an awareness of beauty, an idea about what is beautiful, what looks beautiful. And that's just something that we can hold on to. I mean, you can see it also as far as relationships are concerned. I mean, you could say Mercury Venus is talk about relationships. This is what people want to talk about. People talking about their love lives. I mean, that might be a manifestation of the Mercury Venus conjunction. And Mercury Venus, Venus is connected with what is beautiful, so it can be about art and creativity, and also understanding. We understand what looks good. I mean, all of this stuff I've been talking about. This is this is a theoretical side of it. We're not looking at it in terms of looking at examples yet. We're just looking at the theoretical viewpoint. Now, as far as this conjunction itself is concerned, this particular conjunction, every Mercury-Venus conjunction has a particular quality. And so as far as the quality of this conjunction, so if we look at the chart, well, for a start, it's in Scorpio. And so, being in Scorpio, it may be quite emotional, it may be quite intense, and it may be about, what we're trying to present. And, if we're talking about that in terms of art, it just may be something that we take very seriously. Beauty needs to be taken seriously, how we create this beauty. And I'm always sort of fond of looking at the midpoints that Mercury and Venus are on, to give us an idea about how this Mercury-Venus conjunction is going to work, right now at the end of November. So, so looking at the chart for today, and we get the 90-degree dial. So Mercury and Venus conjunction. So we're looking at Mercury and Venus as a pair. They're right there. And so if we move a pointer onto Mercury and Venus, so the question is, what midpoints does Mercury and Venus occupy? And Mercury and Venus, they do occupy the Hades Aries midpoint. You see, here's Hades, the planet of death, the planet of perhaps decay. It's often associated with garbage, and there is the Aries point. So the Aries Hades midpoint could be about the human condition. The Aries is a world point, and everything perhaps in the world that is corrupt and is debased and is almost sort of criminal. We can see criminality all around us. And with Mercury and Venus both on the Hades Aries midpoint, the average law-abiding citizen, may just be aware of other people's behavior, not just other people's behavior, the kind of behavior we're seeing around the world, and feeling that it is just not good. It could be better, and there's something quite debased about it. And at the same time, Venus and Mercury are on the, what else? They're on the Mars-Pluto midpoint. And so here is Mars and here is Pluto. So very much on the Mars-Pluto midpoint. And so I've talked about the Mercury-Venus conjunction in a way that might sound quite pleasant and relaxing, certainly creative as well. But on the Mars-Pluto midpoint, that could be about being frantic to be creative. Frantic to make an impression. Mars-Pluto, we really want to do it, and the question is, how hard do we try? But when you've got Mars-Pluto and the Aries Hades midpoint. It just could be that there an attempt to really push things too far. And Mercury Venus perhaps is also a message, and if it's about art, it may be about art which is hard work, the kind of art that is maybe concealing something and is in its own way is quite dark. So this Mercury Venus conjunction, I do regard it as being a good thing in terms of us as individuals. But I mean, I think that from a collective view, it could be problematic, and I think there is perhaps some reason to be concerned about it being on the Hades, the Hades Aries midpoint, and so that's something perhaps we just have to be careful about. But I don't want to sort of exaggerate too much on this Mercury Venus conjunction. I mean, it's not an unusual aspect, and maybe by looking at this Mercury Venus conjunction on the 90 degree dial, maybe I'm just taking things too far. Maybe I'm trying too hard to interpret it. So maybe we shouldn't be too worried about Mercury Venus. And after all, it is, all things being equal, a favorable aspect. It's an aspect that fosters intellectual inquiry, the mind, and creativity as well. And so I wanted to look at the evidence, and when I say evidence, I'm thinking about events that have taken place when Mercury and Venus were conjunct. And then I'll be looking at a few people who have Mercury-Venus conjunctions in their horoscopes. And an example of an event that took place when there was a conjunction between Mercury and Venus was Black Monday. And I think that Black Monday, by the way, Black Monday was a stock market crash that took place on October the 19th, 1987. And if you listen to anyone who is, let's say, for example, is maybe over 60 years old, talk about the stock market, then it may well be that they are influenced by Black Monday. And it was a really dramatic event. Even if you didn't have to be involved in the stock market to really notice it, because it was an incredible event. I think the stock market just fell 20% in in just one day, and it was very fast. It did to an extent recover, but it has coloured the way people think. Again, people of a particular generation, and certainly me, just being involved in astrology in 1987. It made me think about, this is a stock market. We're looking for crashes. That's what it's all about. We've got to find crashes, and so it's as if it's a single event. Of course, the reality about crashes is, they can be more subtle than that. You don't just have a 20% fall in one day, but some people have got rather hooked on that idea of a 20% fall in one day, and a lot of that is connected with the observation of that October the 19th, 1987 crash. And why do I say 60 or over? Well, I'm 63, but if you think 1987, I was in 1987. I was 25, so people who were in their 20s and older at the time of Black Monday would really have been influenced by it. Even if they weren't involved in the stock market. So at the time of Black Monday, there was a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Scorpio, and Pluto was there as well. So in the case of Black Monday, you have quite an intense event, and it's also about news, and that could be another way of looking about Mercury and Venus. The news gets out, and that's perhaps how it works. I mean, it's not necessarily just that Mercury. It's not the Mercury Venus conjunction caused the crash. It's just how it was perceived, and how it really influenced people, and that influence may have been intensified by the fact that the stock market crash on October 19th, 1987, nearly 40 years ago, was such a powerful and long-lasting and almost sort of iconic event. And something else that happened with a Mercury-Venus conjunction was the death of Hitler, almost the end of a war in Europe. I mean, not quite, but when Hitler shot himself or poisoned himself, he did both, didn't he? I think there was a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aries, and Aries is perhaps a sudden event, a newsworthy event, and I think news might be a way of looking at it. And Venus here is, Hitler got married on a Mercury-Venus conjunction because he married just before he shot himself, didn't he? Him and Eva Braun. And so Mercury-Venus, in this case, it represents the event. Venus is retrograde, so that would mean he got married with Venus retrograde. Probably not such a good thing to do, particularly as Venus is in Aries. But Mercury, the news spreads, and so that might be just a simple way of looking at this conjunction between Mercury and Venus. And when you've got a Mercury-Venus conjunction, you can apparently get liberated, according to Donald Trump, that is, because Donald Trump's Liberation Day, when he announced all these tariffs, and again, the stock market was really hit quite seriously by it. So that's just a sample of two, Black Monday and Liberation Day, April 2nd, 2005. Again, you can see that there is a conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Pisces. And, Mercury, not especially well placed in Pisces, it's sort of fallen in Pisces, but Mercury, Venus, and a North Node, again, it's news. And you've got Donald Trump talking, making an announcement. And so, you have to ask, what is the quality of this announcement? That Mercury-Venus conjunction is, it's not too far from skeet. I don't think it's exactly on skeet, but, and, you've got this conjunction where you've got Venus has been quite strong. Venus is exalted in Pisces, but then you've got Mercury fallen, and they sort of straddle the North Node. And so there's no doubt that something was said, and when you have got Mercury-Venus conjunction, it can also be about trying to create an impression, trying to give the impression that you're warm and friendly and you're just trying to help. So U.S. aid, which Trump, I'm not quite sure what's happened with U.S. aid. He's basically cut it out of existence. But U.S. aid started on November 3rd, 1961. And this took place with a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Libra. Very nice Mercury-Venus conjunction in Libra. And sort of U.S. aid is about helping people, the United States using its soft power to develop an organization which can help people not just in terms of food, but perhaps with education and telling them how to look after themselves, and maybe telling them about democracy. That's your Mercury-Venus conjunction in Libra. And of course, in the 60s, the country that got most aid from U.S. aid was, of course, South Vietnam. And so U.S. aid is very much an instrument of American power. And with Mercury-Venus conjunction, it seems to be something pleasant, but of course it's also got Mars in Scorpio and a Sun-Neptune conjunction in Scorpio. So US aid was a very sort of deceptive thing. It seemed like a great act of American charity, but in fact, part of the role of the US aid was to sort of support friendly governments, undermine governments that the United States wanted to undermine, and set up NGOs which could have an undermining impact. So this is all Mercury Venus, spreading the word slowly, and if you spread words, you can. This is part of the playbook of America and how it tries to overthrow governments. You perhaps want to focus on the students, and you encourage students to demonstrate against the government, and US aid is perhaps providing some kind of classes in democracy. It's a standard approach. So yeah, I think we can see Mercury-Venus conjunction working quite well there. And a tragic, sort of horrific example of Mercury-Venus conjunction is the Wannsee conference. So the Wannsee conference during the Second World War was, when a decision was made to launch sort of the Holocaust and the final solution, and there was a Mercury-Venus conjunction at the time of this, and sort of all of these sort of Nazi officials turned up, and this was sort of Eichmann was doing a lot of the arranging there, and it was pointed out by the organisers how smooth it was going. I think some of them were anticipating that there would be resistance to this idea of the final solution, and to their pleasant surprise, no one seemed to be too bothered. People didn't seem to resist the idea, and this might be an unfortunate manifestation of Mercury-Venus. It's just smooth. The communication machine works well, and in this case, in spite of the fact that the Mercury-Venus conjunction was square Saturn, so square Saturn might be that discussion was limited. And also look at Uranus. Uranus is not too far from Algol, that really quite sort of unpleasant fixed star. So those are a few events which took place with Mercury making a conjunction to Venus. As far as Mercury-Venus people, the singer Celine Dion has a conjunction between Mercury and Venus, a very close, relatively close conjunction, in Pisces. And, Pisces is receptive, is potentially quite musical. And so I think you could see how that might work. I don't know anything about Celine Dion. I think she has something to do with that film, The Titanic, but I know that she's an important singer who's recently had a lot of health problems, but she has got Pluto opposition the Mercury-Venus conjunction. Maybe the Pluto opposition, her Mercury-Venus conjunction, may say something about her health problems. I don't know about the details. You probably know more from me, but something being restricted, and but on the other hand, Pluto could perhaps allow someone to project their voice in a way that is charismatic, that gets attention. And so, overall, I would have thought that Mercury-Venus was something of a positive there, but it's in the 8th house, and so when we look at health, we should look at everything. I mean, again, I should have looked up what exactly her health problem is about. But it certainly is very sort of chronic, and it sort of influences her ability to perform as a singer. But Venus in Pisces, in its exalted in Pisces, that's pretty good. And so I think she's a good example of a Mercury-Venus conjunction. And with Mercury-Venus, you can often communicate very well, not just through singing. For example, Christopher Hitchens Now, he's been dead for some time, but he was a famous polemicist who had definite ideas about religion and good government and bad government, well, particularly bad government, and he just had this natural flow to him, and he was a very skilled orator, and certainly, he could certainly be incredibly critical. And so he had a Mercury-Venus conjunction, so Mercury in 23 Aries, Venus at 22 Aries, but the Sun was linked with it, and the Mars was linked with it, and Aries was linked, and Mars was linked with it, and it was all in Aries. So in his case, Mercury-Venus is not just sort of smooth and nice and getting on with everyone. It's about being quite fierce, but it's still an aspect that is able to communicate extremely well. And Mercury-Venus can be about high intelligence. It can be, and people who are interested in ideas. If you take, if you're in the UK, you might have heard of Dominic Cummings. He was the mastermind of the Brexit vote, in which Britain, there was a referendum in which Britain agreed to, the British electorate voted to leave the European Union. He was also quite influential at the beginning of Boris Johnson's premiership, and so he had a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Sagittarius, and he has, quite sort of no-nonsense way of communicating. He's very much to the point, but he also is extremely critical. I mean, perhaps a bit like Christopher Hitchens. I mean, well, he's not a polemicist like Christopher Hitchens. He doesn't have such a public profile, but he is an intellectual. He has definite ideas about the way in which government should be run. And so there's his conjunction between Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius. And as far as intelligence is concerned, I mean, Mercury-Venus conjunction is not always going to make you intelligent. So if you look at the IQs of the Nuremberg war criminals, and they're all over 100, because the mean IQ is supposed to be 100, but the Nuremberg defendant with the lowest IQ, which was an IQ of 106, was Julius Streicher. And Julius Streicher is perhaps showing how Mercury-Venus can work in a really negative way. I mean, Mercury-Venus, I mean, he was just famous or infamous for just ranting. He ranted through his newspaper, what was it, Der Stürmer. He made speeches, anti-Semitic speeches, inciting violence, and that's perhaps a rather unusual way for Mercury and Venus to be working. That's not how you'd normally associate it, but he did perhaps in his case, well, he had a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aquarius. He also had a Sun-Mars conjunction. So he had two very close Sun-Mars conjunctions. He had two very close conjunctions in Aquarius, and a conjunction between the Sun and the Mars, and a conjunction between Mercury and Mars. And it could be, but we're seeing a phenomenon whereby that Sun-Mars conjunction is somehow influencing the Mercury-Mars conjunction. And, it's certainly not easy. And his ranting and his general demeanor, it didn't help at Nuremberg. He was hanged, and probably if he had behaved better at Nuremberg and showed some remorse, he probably would not have been hanged, because his basic war crime, as far as I know, was just inciting, just what he was writing in his newspaper and what he was saying in terms of his speeches. And by the last couple of years of the war, I don't think he did anything. I think he was kind of shunned by other other Nazis. But but that is a way in which a Mercury-Venus conjunction, can work. And that Mercury-Venus conjunction can also be a poet. So here is the horoscope of Langston Hughes, the American poet, the sort of African-American poet. I mean, I think he had Jewish ancestry as well, but he was a major part of the Harlem Renaissance. I'd never heard of Langston Hughes before I came to America, but I really like his stuff. It's certainly worth reading, and he has a Mercury-Venus conjunction in Pisces, possibly, because I don't know to have a time of birth. I can't say for sure that his Mercury is in Pisces. It may be that he's got Mercury in Aquarius and Venus in Pisces. But if you've got Mercury-Venus conjunction, like we saw with Celine Dion, you can certainly communicate. But Mercury and Venus also has an edge. We saw that with Christopher Hitchens and Dominic Cummings, that they had an edge. And Langston Hughes' poetry has an edge. I mean, a real edge. And I think that he was perhaps quite critical of people not standing up for themselves. Even people in the African American community in the southern states. How could they put up with this? And he was critical of religion. I mean, he was, I think for a time he was a communist, and I would have said probably an atheist, I think. And he saw, perhaps he was seeing Christianity as just a way in which injustice can be perpetrated. People thinking, well, yeah, the world here is terrible, but at least we've got Jesus. And I think he was very critical of that view. And so there's another link with Christopher Hitchens, being angry about God almost. And so that's an interesting dimension of Mercury Venus, of the Mercury Venus conjunction. Even in his case, even if that Mercury is not in Aquarius and it's in Pisces and it's a Mercury Venus conjunction in Pisces, still it still seems to work in a way that is critical. And I think that's quite an interesting dimension of this Mercury Venus conjunction. And someone who talks a lot, or who has recently been talking a lot, who's got a Mercury Venus conjunction, is Michael Saylor, who is a part of, or I think he's either CEO, maybe someone else is a CEO, but he's certainly the public face of Strategy, this Bitcoin treasury company that has been spending huge amounts of money, raising money to buy Bitcoin, and is creating these really complicated financial structures around Strategy, with Bitcoin. And he has a Venus Mercury conjunction in, well, we don't know where his Venus is because we don't have a time of birth. I'm guessing that his Venus is probably in Capricorn, could be in Aquarius, but I think his Venus is in Capricorn and his Mercury is in Aquarius. And so, yeah, he has a Venus-Mercury conjunction. And again, you've got someone who likes to communicate. He's always talking. He's always on YouTube talking about the wonders of Bitcoin, and he's very clear about it. I mean, maybe Mercury in Aquarius, a fixed sign. He's absolutely sure that he's got it right. I mean, clearly someone who is very clever. Mercury-Venus conjunction can provide intelligence and a degree of mental flexibility, but does that mean open-mindedness? Well, not necessarily. It's about being very clear that you have got it right, or at least it can be. And then there was Moonbin. I don't know if you've heard of Moonbin. Moonbin died some time ago. I think he died in 2023. So Moonbin was a Korean, K-pop star. And a lot of people thought Moonbin was absolutely wonderful. He had a large following, and he died. I think the but there was a whole pressure of being in the music business in Korea, and I think he had to take time off, and he died. I don't think people are quite sure how he died, what the circumstances are, but he had a Mercury Venus conjunction, and if you want to be a K-pop star, would it help to have a Mercury Venus conjunction? Well, it might help. I mean, Mercury Venus in Capricorn, they start them young. As children, the companies behind K-pop, they start to cultivate them, and so he had this constant pressure to perform, to always be on stage. He couldn't take any time off. Mercury and Venus would be his musical ability, or whatever ability you need to be a K-pop star. And when he died, so here's a chart for Moonbin's death. So Moonbin was born in 1998, and he died at the age of 25 in 2023. So here is his Mercury-Venus conjunction, and Saturn was at 4 degrees 29 Pisces when he died. So Saturn was making a semi-square to his Mercury-Venus midpoint. So Mercury-Venus midpoint, well, it would be about his creativity, but Saturn making a semi-square, well, you wouldn't normally associate that with death. You might say, well, it's difficult creativity, some kind of creative crisis. But maybe in this case it led to his death. I mean, if you look at what Eberton says about Saturn aspecting the Mercury-Venus midpoint, again, by semi-square in this case, he says... a thoroughness, a serious attitude to life, the desire to contemplate or meditate deeply in retirement and solitude, creative activity under quiet conditions. And he says difficult artwork, creative design or form shaped from hard or heavy material, a difficult artistic career. So I think that Moonbin with Saturn semi-square his Mercury-Venus midpoint perhaps did represent some kind of creative crisis, but then there is the question of how did he respond to this creative crisis, and that might have led to his death or contributed to his death. And finally, there is Princess Catherine. She does have a Mercury-Venus conjunction, Mercury-Venus conjunction in Aquarius, and I haven't looked at Catherine's chart for some time. Maybe I should look at it. At some stage, but I just wanted to point out that her Mercury-Venus conjunction is square her midheaven, so that might say something about her public profile, and it's in Aquarius. I mean, I think that Catherine, she's pretty intelligent. I would have said she's probably more intelligent than her husband, certainly more intelligent than her brother-in-law, and so she has the Mercury-Venus conjunction, and it's square Jupiter. I mean, she did well at school. She got into a good university, and probably sort of retains that intelligence. But it's in Aquarius, and so in Aquarius there is perhaps something a little bit rigid about it. But it's square Jupiter in Scorpio, and it's in the 6th house. Could it be that her health condition has some relationship to that Mercury-Venus conjunction? I mean, it is square Jupiter, and we do know that she had cancer. I don't think we know what type of cancer, but you can associate Jupiter with cancer. It's absolutely possible. Jupiter is about something getting out of hand, expanding, getting bigger, and so that could be a Jupiter aspecting her Mercury if you were a medical astrologer. But as far as her creativity, I mean, she's into photography, and I think so. I think she is quite creative as a person. But I mean, I'm not especially interested in her, but I mean, I couldn't help but notice that she does have a Mercury-Venus conjunction, in her chart. So that's it. That's all I've got to say about this conjunction between Mercury and Venus. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did enjoy this video, I'd be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. If you want to buy me a coffee, there's a link in the description, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.